All right, so get ready because we are going deep into the world of Terence McKenna. You know, you've given us a ton of his lecture notes and transcripts, and wow, it's really something.
Yeah, he didn't mess around.
Not at all. This ethnobotanist doesn't just talk about plants. He goes way beyond into hallucinogens and shamanism. He even explores how they could, like, change what consciousness even is.
Totally. McKenna was amazing at bringing all these different fields together, like botany and geography, linguistics, even anthropology, all to understand how humans relate to these psychoactive plants. And it's so interesting how he uses geography as like a starting point, even calling it the visible condensation of time.
Whoa, that's a phrase that really makes you think. So how does geography actually play into all of this exploration of consciousness?
Well, he says that geography really shapes like the entire context of how we exist. Like, think about places like Malaysia or the Amazon basin. They're full of all these diverse plant species, and a lot of them, they have these psychoactive properties.
Right.
And McKenna says this is all thanks to their unique geographical histories, right? Millions of years of continents shifting, sea levels changing.
Wow.
It's like evolution is on fast forward there, creating this huge, rich tapestry of plant life. And in that tapestry, well, there's this potential for humans to interact with plants that can alter consciousness.
So it's like the land itself has the key to unlock these different states of consciousness.
Yeah.
But it makes you wonder, how did these ancient cultures figure out how to use these plants? Like, especially when you think about complex things like ayahuasca.
That's a question that really fascinated McKenna. He thought that maybe, before we started thinking so analytically, like we do now, maybe humans had a more intuitive connection to the natural world.
Okay.
Maybe they could even, like, communicate with the plants themselves.
Whoa, that's a really wild concept.
Yeah.
It's like a way of knowing that goes beyond how we think rationally now. It really makes you think about different ways we can interact with the world.
For sure. And this idea actually leads into McKenna's work on shamanism. He saw it as this global thing with all these shared motifs, fire, divination, healing, all that. But he was really clear that shamanism wasn't just about like personal visions. It was really rooted in serving the community.
And this is where he's different from some other scholars, right?
Yeah.
Like Mircea Eliade.
Exactly. Eliade saw like drug-induced shamanism as a sign that the culture was in decline. But McKenna, he argued that it was the original form.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, he said techniques like fasting and breath control came later when the preferred hallucinogens were harder to come by.
Mm.
He uses the example of soma in India, that lost hallucinogenic plant that was key to ancient Vedic rituals.
Right.
Yeah, it's like a ghost in their spiritual history, a reminder of how powerful these plants were in shaping belief systems.
It really seems like we've barely scratched the surface of McKenna's ideas. I mean,
Right.
where does he take us next in this exploration of psychoactive plants and how they affect consciousness?
Well, he takes us on a world tour next, looking at specific plants and their uses across continents. We should start with Eurasia, where, surprisingly, hallucinogens were pretty scarce.
Really? Okay, so what did he find in this hallucinogen-poor region?
He talked about the challenges of using Amanita muscaria, the red and white mushroom, and then there's like the darker side of European witchcraft, which relied on solanaceous plants. Datura, for example. Unpredictable those are. He even told a story about his own not-so-great experience with Datura, where he felt like his body was contorting totally out of control.
Oh, wow. That sounds really intense.
Yeah.
I guess that shows how dangerous these plants can be if you use them without the proper knowledge and guidance.
Yeah, for sure. But even in this seemingly barren landscape, McKenna found some hope.
Oh.
He suggested that maybe a combo of Syrian rue and Arundodonax, that giant river reed, might hold the key to a really strong Eurasian hallucinogen that we haven't discovered yet.
Wow, that's like a botanical treasure hunt waiting to happen.
Totally. It really highlights how deep and complex this whole field is, something McKenna was always trying to understand. But, his exploration of Eurasia wasn't just about plants. He also looked into early Christianity, and that can get controversial.
Oh, right. This is what he talks about John Allegro, who said the whole story of Jesus was a cover-up for a secret mushroom cult.
Yeah, but even McKenna admitted that Allegro's evidence wasn't, like, totally solid.
It's still a fascinating theory, though, right?
Yeah,
I mean, it makes you wonder about how psychoactive plants might have shaped religious stories and symbols.
definitely. And from the mysteries of early Christianity, McKenna takes us across the world to Africa.
So what psychedelic secrets did he uncover there? Africa, a continent so rich in tradition and, as we're seeing, potentially in psychedelic plants too. What exactly did McKenna find there?
Well, McKenna He was really drawn to the iboga cults in Gabon and Cameroon. Iboga is a super strong hallucinogen, and it plays a central role in like their initiation ceremonies and rituals.
Mm.
He also looked into this mysterious plant called galagda, which is used by the Hottentots of southern Africa, but we don't actually know a lot about its effects or how it's used.
Sounds like there's still so much to discover in Africa plant-wise. I'm curious, though, did McKenna look at any of the more well-known plants during his African explorations, like cannabis, for example?
Oh, he did. And you might find his take on cannabis pretty interesting, actually.
Okay.
McKenna argued that even though it's chemically different from, say, LSD or psilocybin, cannabis should still be considered a psychedelic.
Really?
Especially, he said, when you consume it in large amounts and particularly when you ingest it rather than smoking it.
So it's not just about how much you take, but how you take it.
Yeah.
That makes sense. I mean, you think about how different smoking is from eating edibles.
Exactly. McKenna was convinced that the way you consume these plants really matters when it comes to, like, unlocking their full potential. He even shared his own experiences with chillums in Israel, describing them as these really potent smoking devices.
Okay, so we've gone through Eurasia and Africa, looking at how different cultures have used psychoactive plants in such diverse ways. Where does this psychedelic world tour take us next?
Oh, let's go east to Asia.
Right.
McKenna found this fascinating connection between psilocybin mushrooms and early cattle domestication.
Wow, how so?
Well, he pointed to these Neolithic graves in Thailand dating back something like 15,000 years.
15,000 years.
Yeah, and they found human remains there alongside the bones of Bos indicus, a type of tropical cattle.
Okay, I see. So what's the link to psilocybin mushrooms then?
Well, some of the cattle bones had these burnt-out centers, which, suggested that they might have been used as early chillums for smoking. So it paints this picture of a possible ancient relationship between humans, cattle, and psilocybin mushrooms. And it hints that maybe these mushrooms played a pretty big role in those early societies. We can only speculate, of course, but it's a pretty interesting glimpse into our past.
It really is.
Yeah.
Makes you wonder, right? How did these substances possibly influence the development of culture or ritual, or even just like our understanding of ourselves?
Absolutely. And from the ancient practices of Asia, McKenna takes us to a more, I guess you could say, contemporary example, and a pretty curious one from New Guinea. He talks about certain tribes who use what he calls permission mushrooms.
Permission mushrooms. I haven't heard of those. What are they?
Well, these mushrooms aren't actually psychoactive themselves.
Oh, okay.
They're used as like a cultural signal within the tribe, a kind of ritualistic green light to express extreme dissatisfaction or even like rage.
So they're not about like visions, but about giving permission for certain behaviors.
Yeah.
That's such a fascinating example of how these plants can be incorporated into social structures in ways that go beyond just altering consciousness.
Yeah. It shows how adaptable and ingenious humans are, how we've woven these plants into our cultures, using them for all sorts of purposes, not just personal exploration.
So we've traveled the globe now, sampling psychoactive plants from so many different cultures. But I have a feeling McKenna goes way deeper than just listing plants and how they're used. Where do his ideas go next?
Well, this is where things get really, really interesting. We're moving from botany and anthropology into, like, the mind-bending world of consciousness itself. McKenna had this bold idea that at its core, evolution is a conquest of dimensions.
Conquest of dimensions. Okay, you're going to have to explain that. What did he actually mean by that?
He argued that each step in evolution, it brings new information into awareness. It like expands how we see reality. Think about, for example, how the eye developed. Early life forms, they only had light-sensitive patches. But, over time, those patches evolved into these complex organs that could see light, shadow, distance, and eventually color.
So it's like going from a blurry world you can only feel to a world that's bursting with visual information.
Yeah.
That's a massive change in awareness.
Exactly. And McKenna said that language and grammar let humans take another leap forward. We conquered the dimension of time. We developed a sense of history, a future, like a narrative understanding of ourselves within the cosmos.
Wow, that's an incredible concept. So where do psychedelics fit into this whole idea of evolution and conquering dimensions?
McKenna believed that psychedelics, they're pushing us towards the next level of consciousness, what he called a hyperdimensional state, one that goes beyond history and connects us to a larger overmind.
A collective consciousness. That's a pretty big idea. What did he think that would look like?
He actually made a connection to Julian Jaynes' theory of the bicameral mind, Remember, the idea that ancient humans heard the voice of God as separate before it slowly became part of the individual ego.
Yeah, I remember.
So McKenna thought we'd already conquered one higher dimension of consciousness through this internalization.
So we've already merged with one other, this voice of God. And now, through psychedelics, we're being pushed toward an even bigger merging, this overmind.
Exactly. He believed that this dimension of the overmind, it's already here, but it's mostly hidden from our normal awareness. And psychedelics, they give us a way to access it and integrate it. He even saw links to cybernetics and the idea of technology merging with consciousness. He imagined a future where the lines between individual minds and this overmind become blurred.
It's almost like he's describing some kind of hive mind, something out of science fiction. Did he think this was a good thing? Or something we should be afraid of?
Well, he saw both the potential and the risks, to be honest. He warned that there could be destabilization, the unwinding of the ways we think and believe that are so deeply ingrained in us. He compared it to going into uncharted territory. There are dangers, but there are also incredible rewards for those willing to go on the journey.
So it's not just about, tripping out. It's about consciously going through this evolution of consciousness.
Yeah.
About using these tools responsibly and with intention.
Exactly. McKenna believed that if we approach these experiences with care and curiosity, psychedelics can help us prepare for a future that's already coming.
Okay, so we're talking about expanding consciousness, connecting to this overmind, maybe even merging with technology. This is getting pretty wild. What else did McKenna have to say about how psychedelics actually affect the mind?
Well, he used a really interesting analogy to describe the mind when you're on psychedelics. He compared it to visiting a hidden organ in the human body, one we can't usually see or interact with directly.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Like having a sixth sense or discovering a whole new part of ourselves.
Yeah, exactly. He
Hmm.
said that the mind, it's not just a product of the brain, but something separate, something maybe even more fundamental. He used the analogy of a piano and a pianist. The brain, he said, is the instrument, but the mind is the player, the unseen force that brings the music to life.
And, you can't understand music by taking apart a piano. You can't fully understand the mind just by studying the brain.
Right. McKenna really emphasized that to truly get these substances, you have to take them. You have to experience the music, not just analyze the instrument.
Which, of course, presents a challenge for traditional science, which relies on being objective and detached.
Yeah, he was really critical of how psychedelics were being studied at the time, giving them to prisoners and people like that. He felt like that approach totally missed the point. You have to be in the experience, not just observe it from afar.
So he was calling for a new kind of science, one that's open to the subjective, the experiential, the mysterious.
A science that recognizes the limits of the rational mind and is open to the possibility that reality is bigger than we currently understand.
So we've explored the geography of consciousness, the evolution of the mind, how psychedelics can be these catalysts for change. Where does McKenna take us next on this wild ride?
Get ready, because he's going to connect all of this to the UFO phenomenon.
Right, UFOs. Okay, now I'm really interested. UFOs. Okay, so we went from shamanism and plant medicine to extraterrestrial encounters. I'm ready to hear how McKenna ties all of this together.
Yeah, so McKenna, he saw this really deep connection between the whole UFO thing, psychedelics, and that evolving hyperdimensional consciousness we were just talking about. But his take on UFOs might surprise you. He wasn't talking about little green men and spaceships or anything.
So was he saying UFOs are real, but just, not how we usually think of them?
He proposed that UFOs are more like a symptom of how we're struggling collectively, psychically, how we're having trouble integrating this emerging hyperdimensional reality that he kept talking about.
Okay, I think I'm starting to get it. It's like our collective unconscious is pushing these UFO images into our awareness because we're not quite ready to consciously deal with this next step in our evolution.
Exactly. Think of it as a cosmic wake-up call. Our technology is way ahead of our ethics at this point. And so the overmind, that collective consciousness, is trying to step in and course correct. It's like a pressure valve. It's releasing. And it shows up in our awareness as these weird, unexplainable phenomena.
It's like our collective shadow trying to get our attention, using these symbols and images. He mentioned Christianity, too. How did that fit in?
Oh, McKenna made this fascinating comparison between the rise of Christianity and what might happen if we actually confirmed contact with extraterrestrials. He said both could be seen as interventions by the overmind, like attempts to steer humanity away from, a path of self-destruction.
He also pointed out how Christianity took over the Roman Empire and basically stopped their scientific progress. It ushered in this long period of, like, cultural stagnation.
Is he saying a similar thing could happen if we, officially made contact with UFOs? That was his concern. He thought our faith in science could just, crumble, and we might embrace some new dominant narrative that would shut down other viewpoints, leading to another period of stagnation. It's not that he thought aliens would cause this stagnation, but rather that our human systems might just latch on to this event and use it to create a new dogma, a new rigid way of thinking.
So it's not the aliens we should worry about, but our own human tendency to cling to certainty, to look for saviors or explanations outside ourselves instead of, cultivating inner wisdom and responsibility.
Yeah, spot on. It's recognizing that the real threat isn't out there, but inside us, in our own minds, in our own collective shadow.
And that's where psychedelics come in, right?
Yeah.
They offer a way to actually confront that shadow, to explore these hidden dimensions of consciousness
Yeah.
before they, burst into our reality in ways we might not be ready for.
He thought that by facing our inner aliens, so to speak, we could better deal with encounters with outer ones. It's about developing a more flexible and nuanced view of reality, embracing the unknown instead of being afraid of it.
McKenna's work really pushes us to grow up, basically, to take responsibility for our own evolution, both individually and as a species. He really seemed to believe we have the power to evolve beyond these cosmic interventions, these, external course corrections. And we can do that, he said, by using things like psychedelics to explore the vastness of our own minds and how fluid they can be.
He saw psychedelics as these really powerful tools to, shed those rigid beliefs we cling to grow our capacity for empathy and understanding. He was convinced that if we use them responsibly, with intention, we can become active participants in how consciousness evolves, not just, passive bystanders.
Wow. This deep dive into Terence McKenna has been a wild ride, that's for sure.
Yeah.
It's really challenged how I think about consciousness, reality, our place in the universe, all of it. His ideas are complex, and they're challenging, but wow, they're thought-provoking.
He wanted us to explore these frontiers of consciousness, but to do it responsibly. And, he reminded us that we're not just watching this cosmic show, we're a part of it. We're part of this evolution of the mind. His work makes us question, makes us want to explore, makes us want to be more conscious creators of our own future.
So, what parts of McKenna's ideas resonated most with you? What parts of consciousness would you like to explore more? This deep dive, it's really just the beginning of your own journey.